Welcome to Bear in Mind. I'm your host, Chancellor Bob Berdahl. We're coming to you from our television studio at the University of California, Berkeley, where we're joined by a small audience of students, faculty, and staff. Bear in Mind, which also appears on the UC Berkeley website, is a monthly conversation with some of the most interesting and informed people here at the Berkeley campus. On this edition, we'll be talking to Pam Burnett about undergraduate admissions, to Maria and Vanessa Bailey, a mother and daughter who are attending school together, and law professor Jesse Choper about the Pledge of Allegiance controversy. So stay tuned for this edition of Bear in Mind. Each year at this time, thousands of high school seniors are filling out applications and looking to put the best shine on their high school careers as they apply to UC Berkeley and other schools of their choice. Our next guest, Pamela Burnett, is the Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at Berkeley. Welcome to Bear in Mind, Pam.
Good morning, Chancellor Berdahl. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, we're glad to have you here. Tell us a little bit about how many applications we get each year, how many we can admit. What's the ratio?
Berkeley's a very popular university, and we receive close to 37,000 applications each year, and we think we'll receive at least that many freshman applications for fall 2004, and probably more than 10,000 transfer applications as well for fall 2004. Out of the 37,000 freshman applications, we were able to admit about 8,800 last fall. And of those, about 3,700 enrolled as freshmen.
So we admit about 1 out of 4 applicants, roughly?
Yes, at both the freshman level and at the transfer level. And transfer admission is becoming more and more competitive every year as well.
That's a very competitive pool. Tell us something about the pool of applicants. How do you review all of those students? You have 37,000 applications. What's the process for reviewing them?
We have a very thorough review process for all of the freshman applications. Every single one of them is reviewed in a comprehensive process, cover to cover, by 2 independent readers. And when I say comprehensive review, that means that we're looking at applicants beyond just their grade point averages and their test scores, but we're looking at an expanded definition of merit, which includes the difficulty of the high school curriculum, the pattern of grades over time, the academic activities and initiative taken outside of the classroom. And we're looking at context as well. What were the educational and other opportunities available to the student?
Why don't we just use SAT scores? I mean, everybody takes the same exam on an SAT, and it is a standardized measurement. Wouldn't it be easier to compare students from different schools who have different educational experiences just by how they perform on the SAT? Wouldn't that be really the fairest comparison? There are people who really are saying that, it seems to me, and why don't we just do that?
The College Board itself, which created and administers the SAT, has always advised colleges and universities against using the SAT score as a sole factor for determining who should be admitted. So even the College Board recognizes that colleges really need to look at many, many factors to measure academic achievement. Besides that, a test score comes from something that you've done in a particular day, and it doesn't reflect the achievement that you've created over time.
We here also at Berkeley have a large number of transfer students. And that's a different way of getting a Berkeley degree, going to a community college for a couple of years. How many students do we admit through that transfer route? And do they do as well as students who are admitted as freshmen?
We admit more than 2,000 transfer students from community colleges every year. The vast majority of the transfer students that we admit come from a California community college. And we're very happy to say that the transfer students do as well here at Berkeley as students who entered as freshmen. They have comparable graduation rates, and they also have comparable grade point averages. And so there's a little bit of an adjustment period, because after all, they haven't had those previous 2 years to become acclimated to the Berkeley atmosphere and the climate of study. However, they tend to be able to make that adjustment and do really well, and they add a lot to the vitality of the classroom by their slightly different set of experiences before enrolling here at Berkeley.
What advice would you give to a student? Now, it's a little bit late to be changing anything about your academic career in high school 2 weeks before the deadline, but as people are actually approaching that application, what advice would you give them?
First, I think I need to clarify something.
Okay.
The month of November is the month to file your application to UC Berkeley or any UC campus. But since November 30th is on a Sunday, UC is pretty good at giving a grace day. And that is why December 1st is the deadline this year. And for students who are just now starting to look at their application, I'd say, yes, please start looking at that early, because it is a rather detailed application, and part of the application includes a personal statement, and you want to give yourself plenty of time to think about the questions on the personal statement and how best to convey who you are when you answer those questions. Be prepared to write several drafts and make it your own words, your own thoughts, but it's perfectly fine to ask someone who knows you really well to look at what you've written and to give you ideas or to remind you of some things about yourself that you might have forgotten to put in.
Well, good luck to you and your staff as you approach this new admission season, reviewing somewhere between 40 and 50,000 applicants for freshman and transfer places. I know it's a huge job, and good luck.
Thank you. We're looking forward to our next crop of applications.
Thank you very much, Pam. That was Pam Burnett, Director of Undergraduate Admissions at the University of California, Berkeley, on Bear in Mind. Although Maria and Vanessa Bailey attend classes, do homework, take Bart to school, and share house, laptop, and car, they are not ordinary Berkeley juniors. Maria is Vanessa's mother, and like her daughter, is fulfilling a cherished dream of coming to Berkeley. Maria and Vanessa, welcome to Bear in Mind.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chancellor.
We're delighted to have you here. Maria, you work in the corporate world. You've raised a family. You've had a really successful life. What caused you to want to come back to school and to attend Berkeley?
Oh, it was a long-held dream because neither my mother or my grandmother ever had a college degree. And when I came here in 1981 and I started working as a secretary, deep inside my heart, I always knew I could go to college and get a college degree. But family obligations, of course, come first. Mm-hmm. And so I dedicated 21 years of my life to raising a family and work in the corporate world. Ernst & Young's been my employer for 17 years.
Okay. Okay, Vanessa, I understand that you were not admitted to Berkeley as a freshman, but that you were admitted to a number of very elite private universities. Why did you decide to go to community college and then transfer to Berkeley rather than go from the get-go to one of those distinguished private universities?
To me, Berkeley was a lifelong dream. Growing up on the other side of the tunnel, to me, Berkeley was just absolutely like this mythical academic playground where, you know, all these intellectual people hung out and all these great students got to really relish in all these great professors.
Well, isn't the myth accurate?
Absolutely. But as you grow older, you start realizing that there's all these other great schools. But for me, what I really like about Berkeley and what I really liked is that it's a public institution. And for me, going to private schools my whole life, I wanted to be part of a public institution, something that's not a good old boys club, something that's not, you know, who your parents know or how much money you donated to the school, that it's people that are here from all different types of walks of life, all from California, all there based on merit and all bringing something different to the table. Mm-hmm. And that's what I liked about Berkeley, and that's why I was willing to go to DVC and Diablo Valley College and do the first 2 years there, because that was something that I valued more than, you know, having a college experience and going to the dorms like all my other friends were doing. I mean, I definitely was a little, you know, perturbed that I got to miss out on that. But in the long run, I feel that, you know, my academic career and the things that I'm able to receive from going to Berkeley definitely outweighed all that other stuff. So it was definitely a good choice.
Good. Is there a kind of friendly competition between the two of you? You don't have any classes together, you told me, so you don't have that direct competition. But do you kind of compete to see who gets the best grades?
Oh, she competes. Don't even try to answer that question. She competes so much. She called me the first day she got her paper back. On my cell phone, I get this message. Hi, Vanessa. It's your mother. I was just calling to say I got my first paper back, and I got an A. And she's like screaming in the phone, and, you know, I can tell she must have been doing a little dance and joy, and, you know.
Did you feel a little pressure from that?
Oh, absolutely, because she's like, oh, well, what'd you get on your first paper, Vanessa? And, you know, it's like, actually, I got an A. Thank you very much. But there is definitely friendly competition, and she'll always beat me because she's just such a perfectionist. She's just so willing to not sleep and not eat and not do all the things that I feel like I need to do to get that A. And I'll be like, I have to go to sleep. It's midnight. I need to sleep. Otherwise, I'll just, you know, be shot in all my classes. But she'll stay up and do it.
It is really interesting to see the approach to education from a younger person versus an older person. We older people always say that education is wasted on young people, and she is incredibly. And I think I take pride that I educated her to be social conscious and very responsible and wanting to be curious and learning about life and society in general. But for me, it's like searching for answers and understanding, making connections. Putting theory into the practice of everything that's happened in my life as an immigrant, as a mother, as a corporate worker, all of those things that are part of society. And I had always studied business courses. And I think that when you just do that, it's so narrow, because once I started taking social sciences and humanities, my life's changed. I became a different person. You know, I began to put one and one together and understanding what things were happening. The whole admission process at Berkeley, the fact that she didn't get in when she first applied, me working so hard, why are these things happening? So you have to really be interested in being the citizen of the United States and actually being active about what's happening and learning about what's happening in your society.
Vanessa, you said that you work every day.
Yep.
Where do you work?
I work at my old elementary school, Palmer, in Walnut Creek, and so when I'm done with classes here, I take BART, and I usually get off at Pleasant Hill and walk to the school. And it's a K through 8th grade, or actually junior kindergarten through 8th grade school. It's very small, and I just help out after school with kindergartners, and you know, they have after school care, and they stay till like 6 o'clock, I think it's the deadline, and so I stay till 6 and just watch them and mediate their squabbles and tend to their bruises and pass out Band-Aids and lollipops after school. And so it's really a great job because I know what they want. I know the principal. He was my principal. So he's really, if I say, you know, I have a huge paper due, I need to talk to this professor, I'm going to be late, or I just can't come, period, for this whole week because I have finals. You know, I've already told him I'm not going to be coming the week before finals. Okay. I need that time.
And what's your major?
My major is English.
And what do you plan to do?
I would like to go to law school, and I don't really know what kind of law I want to go into. Because I work with kids every now and then, I think I'd like to do something with children, because I also volunteer with foster children, and getting to see kind of the inequality and the injustices that they get dealt every day is enough for me to kind of think about maybe going to some sort of child advocacy group.
Very good. Will you both be graduating then in the spring of 2005?
Yes.
You graduate together?
I hope so.
Wouldn't that be another good story?
Great story. Well, you both have wonderful, wonderful stories, and we're very, very pleased that you both are at Berkeley. Thank you very much, Maria and Vanessa.
Thank you for having us, Chancellor.
That was Maria and Vanessa Bailey, two students, mother and daughter, both at Berkeley. We're delighted to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Recently, the United States Supreme Court elected to hear a case dealing with the Pledge of Allegiance. At issue is whether the pledge should be banned from public schools because it uses the words, "under God." Our next guest, Jesse Chopra, is the Earl Warren Professor of Public Law here at Berkeley. Jesse, welcome to Bear in Mind.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
This case has really become an interesting case. The Supreme Court elected to take this case from the Ninth Circuit. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of the case and why it now lands in the lap of the Supreme Court?
Yes, the father of this 8 or 9-year-old girl who was attending schools near Sacramento is an atheist. He is also he's a practicing physician who is also a lawyer. He objected not to the pledge itself, but to its recitation with the phrase "under God" in the pledge, on the grounds that that's a violation of separation of church and state. And he won a decision in the Ninth Circuit. 3 judges sat, 2-1. They decided, after reading the Supreme Court's relevant precedents in this area, that they dictated the conclusion that this was what's called a violation of the Establishment Clause. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. Then the entire Ninth Circuit, closely split, decided that they were not going to review it by a larger panel. Review was sought in the U.S. Supreme Court, and they granted it. They grant only about one out of 100 cases that are brought to them. But this one looked like a pretty good chance, largely because it's an enormously controversial issue. The question of religion in the schools, while it's not quite as intense as some constitutional issues that we have, like abortion, it nonetheless, in many ways, is more pervasive. And to this day, 75–80% of people polled still disagree with the 1960s decisions, which held that you cannot have recitation of prayer or Bible reading in the public schools.
When was that phrase introduced, and what were the circumstances or reasons for it getting introduced in the first place?
Yeah, it's relatively simple. In the early 1950s, at the height of the McCarthy era, the Congress added this phrase, one nation, indivisible, but before in between, one nation under God, indivisible. And it passed, as you would expect, by overwhelming majorities in both houses of Congress. The president was enthusiastic about it. And it was to separate us, as was said many times, separate the United States from, quote, godless communism. So the purpose was that way, and it's been, around ever since. Interestingly, relatively infrequently challenged. Only one other case has gotten as far as the United States Court of Appeal, the level of courts below the Supreme Court, and they found no violation of the Establishment Clause in that case.
Is there a distinction to be drawn between that establishment, as it were, of that phrase and the phrase in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yeah. In God We Trust is our national motto. That's Congress has made that by statute. That the major difference between the two in terms of separation of church and state is that when this is recited in the schools every day, there are going to be kids. It's voluntary, I should say. Any kid who doesn't want to participate doesn't have to, can leave the room. That goes back to 1943. It's interesting. When
Even the pledge. Being able to...
No, under God, that's right.
Yeah.
When this is in the middle of the Second World War, in which Jehovah's Witnesses challenged it on the grounds, just having to recite the flag pledge, on the grounds that is, under their interpretation of the Bible, this was a graven image contrary to a provision of the Ten Commandments. And the court, although it never said that there was a religious right to absent yourself from these exercises, they said anybody has the right, that the government cannot compel people to believe or to express a belief. That violates the First Amendment freedom of speech. So it's been voluntary ever since. Okay. So even though it's voluntary, the argument is that particularly in an elementary school or secondary school setting, the inherent pressure, peer group pressure, the urge to conform, that sociological studies have demonstrated, and I think it's really pretty much accepted that kids feel pressure to participate in these things, and particularly after a time like 9/11. I mean, this, after all, is not even just a prayer. This is a hardcore patriotic exercise when you pledge allegiance to the flag. So that they seem like oddballs, and therefore they will participate, and they'll participate contrary to their religious beliefs. Now, no one's fashioned an argument like that about in God we trust on the coins in your pocket, that this is in any way compromising your religious beliefs. That's the difference.
What do you think, I know that it's only gambling people take odds on what the Supreme Court will decide, but what do you think they'll ultimately decide in this case?
I think they're going to reverse the Ninth Circuit, and they're going to find that there's no violation of the separation of church and state. I should say I'm not infrequently wrong in these predictions, but I think that one justice, as many people know, has taken himself out, and that's Justice Scalia. And he took himself out because he, in a speech, expressed a very strong view that this was not unconstitutional. Okay. So there's 8 left.
It'll be eight judges making the decision.
Yeah, and I'll be really surprised if they don't get at least 5 of the 8.
With the growing political force of the religious right in America, and with things like President Bush's faith-based initiative, is the wall of separation between church and state being eroded?
It is certainly true over the last, 40 years, that the moral majority, I guess one way, has become much more active politically on a national level. But the pressures for the inclusion of acknowledgement, use of religion within the public system, I think has been around for a long, long time. And I think the change that has occurred in the last 50 years has been in the attitude of the Supreme Court, which they really didn't get into this business in a big way until about 1950, 1947, in fact. And for about 25 years, let's say 25 out of those 50 years, they have been quite separationist in all the decisions that I've talked about, including on the other.
That largely the Warren Court?
It is largely the Warren Court, but not only the Warren Court. It is before a few years of the Warren Court and for some years after the Warren Court. But they've become more accommodationist. That is to say, more willing to not have as high and impervious a wall between church and state as before. I rather doubt that the influence of politics has had anything to do with that. I think it is the influence of thought. And they're human beings on the Supreme Court. There is no litmus paper test for determining what is a violation of the freedom of religion, of the separation of church and state. And a lot of it depends on one's ideology, philosophy, and that has changed, although the court's very sharply split.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out in the decisions of the Supreme Court, and we'll look forward perhaps to talking with you after those decisions and see if your prognosis was in fact accurate.
You wouldn't have me back otherwise. That's right.
Well, thank you very much, Professor Jesse Choper, the Earl Warren Professor of Public Law at Berdahl, University of California, Berkeley. It's been a pleasure having you on this Bear in Mind.
Pleasure to be here.
Jesse.
Thank you.